Our scripture reading this morning comes from 2 Corinthians chapter 8, beginning with the first verse. And now, brothers, we want you to know about the grace that God has given the Macedonian churches. Out of the most severe trial, their overflowing joy and their extreme poverty welled up in rich generosity. For I testify that they gave as much as they were able, and even beyond their ability. Entirely on their own, they urgently pleaded with us for the privilege of sharing in this service to the saints. And they did not do as we expected, but they gave themselves first to the Lord, and then to us, in keeping with God's will. So we urge Titus, since he had earlier made a beginning, to bring also to completion this act of grace on your part. But just as you excel in everything, in faith, in speech, in knowledge, in complete earnestness, and in your love for us, see that you also excel in this grace of giving. I am not commanding you, but I want to test the sincerity of your love by comparing it with the earnestness of others. For you know the grace of our Lord Jesus Christ, that though he was rich, yet for your sakes he became poor, so that you, through his poverty, might become rich. And here is my advice about what is best for you in this matter. Last year you were the first not only to give, but to have the desire to do so. Now finish the work, so that your eager willingness to do it may be matched by your completion of it, according to your means. For if the willingness is there, the gift is acceptable according to what one has, not according to what he does not have. Our desire is not that others might be relieved while you are hard pressed, but that there may be equality. At the present time, your plenty will supply what they need, so that in turn their plenty will supply what you need. Then there will be equality, as it is written, he who gathered much did not have too much, and he who gathered little did not have too little. This is the word of the Lord. Thanks be to God. In Georgia, there's a little church where they have Wednesday night services all the time. One particular Wednesday night, a very wealthy man stood up to give his testimony. I'm a millionaire, he said, and I attribute all of my rich blessings to God's blessings on me. I still remember the turning point in my faith. I remember it like it was yesterday. I had just earned my very first dollar, and that night I went to a church service. The preacher was a missionary on the foreign fields who told about his work. I knew that I only had $1 bill, and I had either to give it all to the Lord's work or nothing. So at that moment, I decided to give my one whole dollar bill to the work of the Lord. And I believe that God has blessed that decision, and that is why I am a rich man today. As he finished, it was clear that the whole congregation was impressed with his story. He walked back and he took his seat in a pew, and there was a sweet little old lady sitting right next to him, and she said, "My, that was a wonderful and powerful story. I dare you to do it again."
Amen.
Might be a little tougher when it's more than $1. What do you think? In the New Testament, both Jesus and Paul talked a lot about money. You know, I have discerned through all the times that I've read the Bible, if you took all the religion, all the sex, all the politics, and all the money out of the Bible, a large print version would only be this thick. Seems like that's all God has to say to us. But I suppose that means we should say it to one another as well. Paul and Jesus talked about why we should give money and how we should give. One thing that neither Paul nor Jesus ever talked about is a budget. They didn't know anything about a budget. They didn't care about a budget. In church, not just this one, but in every Christian church where I have ever been a member or the pastor, we talk lots more about the budget than anything else when it came to money. We talk about how much we need to spend and how we're going to underwrite that budget. We talk about money and budget as though we're some sort of a club or a charitable organization or a business with financial obligations that have to be met. Somehow, as we figure out how we're going to give to underwrite the budget, we all think that we should give our fair share. But none of us seems to take any counsel from anybody else about what our fair share might be. We get to decide that for ourselves. Last year, that idea of giving left this congregation set more than $7,000 short of what it said it would underwrite. Now, I'm a firm believer if something ain't broke, don't fix it. But when you come up more than $7,000 short, something's broke, and we need to fix it. Unlike Ross Perot. How many of you remember Ross Perot? I wanted to think that I'm not getting that old, okay? If nobody remembers Ross Perot, I'm way too old. Anyway, unlike Ross Perot, who offered us descriptions of all the problems but no solutions, I hope to offer to us a solution today. To find that solution, you know what I did? I did what I just did right then. I turned right over here and I found this book, the Bible. In this book is where every one of us should turn when we find ourselves with some problem. Because God, the human condition has not changed that much, and God has spoken to the human condition in many ways in that book. Oftentimes, we can find a spot in there that says, that is, if not directly on point, seriously related to whatever struggle we are facing today. So there I went, and I found the passage that I just read a little while ago. There are a lot of passages that apply, but it seemed to me that was the one God wanted read and talked about in this place today. Now let's go back and read verses 2 and 3 again. Out of their most severe trial, their overflowing joy, and their extreme poverty, three things, out of those three things, welled up in rich generosity. Severe trial, overflowing joy, extreme poverty. From those things welled up rich generosity. For I testify, Paul said, that they gave as much as they were able and beyond their ability. You know, today some people say the Great Recession is over. I'm not sure that I believe that. Many people in our country are still out of work. Many people in our county and in our community are still out of work. They're suffering. Some of the people who are working are not doing the job for which they sought education, for what they got their training for, and so they're making less money than they should be making. Others who are out of work have been out of work so long that their unemployment has run out, and now they have no income whatsoever. Beware of reports of dropped unemployment. All that means is 40 million people fell off the roll because they no longer qualify. Their time has run out, but they are not employed. They are wondering where their next meal will come from. All of that and more was true for the Macedonians that Paul was writing about when he said, out of their severe trial, out of their overflowing joy, and out of their extreme poverty, not to mention their persecution. All of that and more was applicable to the Macedonians. And yet, in the face of persecution and poverty, they were able to find enormous generosity for the work of the Lord. They were able to do that because of one thing. Can anybody tell me why they were able to figure out how to come up with enormous generosity for the work of the Lord? Help me out here. Anybody? What were those three things? Severe trial, overwhelming joy. Oh, that might be it. What do you think? out of their overwhelming joy, enormous generosity welled up. Where'd that overwhelming joy come from? That overwhelming joy came from their sure and certain knowledge of their salvation in Jesus Christ. I guess in posing a spiritual solution, I have to ask, do we experience overwhelming joy from the knowledge of our salvation in Jesus Christ? Now, one way to think about that, most things need a comparison, right? Light to dark, good to evil, most things need a comparison. So one way to think about whether we experience overwhelming joy at our knowledge of our salvation in Jesus Christ is to think about when we are around our kids and our grandkids, our friends or our teammates, and especially when everything is going well. When our kids graduate from high school or college, get their first job, when the team we play on is winning and everything is going great, and everything is fine in our lives with our friends and our families, and it's just wonderful, well, we all feel great joy then, don't we? We feel great. Every one of us feels great in those good times. If we do not experience that kind of joy, and even greater joy when we think about our salvation in Jesus Christ, maybe we haven't really considered what Jesus has done for us. Because if we have, we can't possibly miss the great joy and thanksgiving that comes with that. Perhaps this might be a place, if we do not experience that overwhelming joy, this might be a place where each one of us individually needs to do some work. What has Jesus really done for me? Now, no longer speaking about the Macedonians, Paul started speaking to the Corinthians, to whom the letter was written. And he said, just as you excel in everything, in faith, in speech, in knowledge, in complete earnestness, and in your love for us, see that you also excel in this grace of giving. In this, I think this congregation compares pretty well to the Corinthians. They did a lot of things well. So do we. But apparently, we have empirical knowledge from the figures from last year. Apparently, not enough of us share in the grace of giving. And oddly enough, in the Bible you have in the pews, it says gracious work. Okay? But oddly enough, that word translated grace or gracious can also be translated joy. We are not experiencing the joy of giving or this joyous work for the Lord Jesus Christ. Now, there are a lot of hardships, or at least there are supposed to be, when it comes to being a Christian. We're supposed to be persecuted. We're supposed to be outcast in the community. We're not supposed to be able to hold any high position because people are prejudiced against us. We don't experience that. Maybe that's part of the problem. But giving to the Lord and the Lord's work was never intended to be a hardship for us. It is part of the joy of life in Jesus Christ. Paul says, and I can confirm from personal experience, that there is a lot of joy and satisfaction that comes from giving a significant portion of our income to the Lord and the Lord's work. Many of you know, and some may not though, that our Stewardship Committee recommends to the board, and the board passes on a budget that includes 13.5% of all receipts be given to mission outside the walls of this congregation. 13.5% right off the top. I don't know how often that check is cut, but I think monthly, right off the top. Go straight to the Outreach Committee for spending on mission beyond the walls of this congregation. 13.5%. Ladies and gentlemen, that is a significant percentage. You know what else it is? It's an act of leadership. I mean, we call out our leaders in the congregation, and we expect them to lead us. And establishing that 13.5% for giving beyond the congregation is an act of leadership on their part. Then we as a congregation gather together and we say, we'll do that. You know what happened last year? We came up $7,000 short on the budget, which meant $700. No, that would only be a tithe. Well, 13.5% of $7,000, that money did not go to outreach. And that money would have fed a lot of people. We missed what we could have done. We missed out on the joy of that giving. Maybe not everybody in this room can afford to step up to the point that the congregation had and give from our own pocket 13.5% of our income right off the top. Maybe because of existing bills like student loans we committed to long ago, or kids in college that we didn't quite save enough for, or something. Some of us might find even the tithe at 10% a steep hill to climb. But I suspect that any of us who are not presently tithing could look into our budgets and find out that, we probably could get along without 5% or maybe even 7% of what we're taking in right now and start ourselves on the road to the joy of giving a tithe to the Lord. Once upon, I will not stand here and pretend to you that I have been tithing since I earned my first dollar. That would be a big old fat lie. But, once upon a time, I really thought it was difficult. You remember I told you that I sojourned among the Baptists for about 10 years? Well, I disagreed with them about some of their theology. But one thing that I learned from the Baptists that I never learned from a disciple was, you will tithe, and we won't talk about a budget. They never talked about a budget. They talked about the fact that we believed in the Lord. And the Lord called on us to tithe, and therefore we will. And we'll worry about how to spend the money you give us when it comes in. We'll spend it on the work of the Lord. You give us way more than we need, we'll spend money all over the world doing the work of the Lord. That's what we'll do with it. We promise you the work of the Lord will be done. Cindy and I, as others have before us and others have since, have found that making that commitment to tithe and sometimes even be able to go beyond that is just not very hard at all. You just establish that thing as part of your way of doing business, and the next thing you know, it's as normal as breathing. It's easy. And it feels really great to know that we've underwritten no small part of the work of the Lord done in this place and beyond. And from my own personal experience, I can tell you one thing. You'll never know how good it feels till you try.